Hello all you happy people. This week's recipe is my special homemade oyster stew. There is nothing better on a cold night, not even my homemade deer chili, nothing better than a big bowl of this oyster stew with some warm crusty bread for dipping. I start out with 5 medium-sized leeks, and I slice them very thin and put them in a big tub of water in the sink, because leeks can have some mud, some dirt inside, so you want to make sure that you put them in a sink of water and wash them very well. Stir them around with your fingers. And I also like to slice them very thin. Use the entire leek, the green part and the main part of the bulb. Everything gets sliced. Next, I'm going to dice up some celery. I'm going to keep the leaves and dice those up as well. I like to use the leaves because they give it a good flavor, a little bit of bite. Some extra virgin olive oil in a nice deep pot, because I'm making quite a big batch today. Some butter. I like to use a good bit of butter. You can use a little less if you want. Today I'm using a little bit more butter because I'm making a big batch. Some freshly ground white pepper. I'm going to grind that off and leave it sitting to the side for later use. And some black peppercorns I'm going to grind in my mortar and pestle. That's out of focus, but it is black peppercorns. That's what it looks like. Going to grind that up nice, smells good, it's very fresh, and set that off to the side as well. 3 thick strips of bacon. You want to cook this very slowly, not too hot, and don't cook it too long. Now you can make this recipe with the potato or without the potato. Today I'm in the mood for the potato, so I'm going to take one. I always cut the ends off my potato just out of habit. And I'm going to slice it into several very thin slices. Once that's done, I'm going to take each slice and slice it up into little thin French fries. Then I'm going to dice those French fries up. I like to make my potatoes for this recipe very small because they cook easier, they cook more quickly, and they're not too chunky in the final product. It's much easier to eat and enjoy. My bacon's done now, so I'm going to take that off and dice it up. And very importantly, I'm going to keep the fat in the pan from the bacon. Do not throw that away. There's a lot of good flavor there. So I'm just going to take that and dump it into the big pot. Then I'm going to put it on very low heat and let it just melt. You don't want to boil it. Just get it very melted and simmering. If you burn it, you're going to have to start over. So keep the heat very, very low. As soon as it's melted and just barely simmering, I'm going to put the potatoes in. Stir everything around. Make sure all those potatoes are coated with the butter and oil mixture. And once they are, I'm going to simmer that for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, just until they start to get soft. You want to always cook the things that take the longest first, and then add other things. So now that the potatoes are a little bit soft, I'm going to add the celery with the leaves. Going to give that a good stir. Make sure everything's coated evenly. And then I can pour in these beautiful leeks that I've thoroughly washed and drained. We're just going to dump those right in. I'm holding the camera with one hand, so this is a little more difficult, but once they're dumped in, I need to stir those around again and make sure they're coated with the moisture. The easiest way to do that is with 2 long wooden spoons. Just dip it deeply down in there, pull it up, fold it in, but I'll do the best I can with one hand right now. Now I'm going to add the pepper, the black pepper first, And you know, a lot of people say, well, what's the measurement? How much do you use? Well, you use enough. Just use enough, as much as you want, to your taste. It's not rocket science. There's no strict recipes. The white pepper goes in next. And I'm also going to add a couple or 3 shakes of Old Bay. And as the steam hits my camera lens, I'm going to fold that in, stir it. You can see the leeks are already getting nice and tender. Each time you add a new ingredient, give it a good stir. Next is the organic chicken bone broth. I use the unsalted. You can bring your salt up to taste once the product is finished or nearly finished. Don't make it too salty or you'll ruin it. So we're just going to dump that broth in there. You can use vegetable broth or even seafood broth if you like. I tend to use the chicken broth. If you want the stew to be thinner, use more broth. If you want it to be thicker, use less broth. Very simple. And once we have the broth in there, I'm going to give it a nice stir again, get everything coated evenly, let it simmer. Now I actually ended up using 3 8-ounce tubs of fresh oysters for this recipe. There's 2 there, but I used 3. The oysters were large, and so I took each oyster one at a time and diced it up to bite size. That's 1 oyster diced up. I did that with each and every oyster, but I did save a few whole oysters to eat with my saltine crackers, my homemade cocktail sauce, because that's one of my favorite appetizers. Do not throw away the liquor from the tubs of the oysters. That's a lot of flavor there, so keep that with the oysters all diced up. There it is. And I'm just going to dump that now into the pot that's just barely simmering on the stove over there. Oysters and the liquor from the tubs, just dump it all right in. Give it a good stir and let it simmer on very low heat for a little while. That smells delicious. I think my mom would probably like this. My Aunt Jo would probably turn her nose up at it, I'm not sure. But to me it smells delicious. I'm going to put the lid back on and just let it simmer and take its time. Let all those flavors come together. I've had the bacon off to the side now for a while, so I'm going to dump that in. A little bit more flavor and a little bit of a crunch. Again, each time you add an ingredient, give it a good stir, mix it up. Now I'm going to add some heavy whipping cream. You can use half and half for this recipe if you like. I like the heavy cream. If you want the mixture to be creamier, use more cream. If you want it to be a little less creamy, use a little bit less cream. Or you don't have to actually use any cream at all in this recipe, but I like it creamy, so I use the heavy whipping cream. You can experiment with it and see what you like the best. I think I ended up using 1 1/2 pints of cream in this recipe because it is a big pot full. So just keep pouring until it has the color and consistency that you like. And then we're just going to simmer it again for a while, let all those flavors come together. And of course, while that's simmering, we'll make a salad. Or 2, if you have a partner. That's his and hers salads. Got my Manhattan on rocks saltines, homemade cocktail sauce with a lot of horseradish, and a few leftover fresh oysters to eat as an appetizer. This is one of my favorite appetizers. Yummy, yummy, yummy. Now I also went to a local bakery today and they had a freshly baked loaf of beautiful dark sourdough bread, so I brought that home, cut off a nice big chunk, and I'm just going to warm that up in the countertop oven. I'm not going to toast it, I'm just going to get it nice and warm. One of my favorite dressings on my salad, and we're almost ready to go here. Now I'm going to dip out a couple of bowls. I made a mistake. I'm holding the camera with one hand, so I'm dipping with one hand. Don't try this at home. I ended up making a mess. I should have dipped over by the stove, but I got a little bit ahead of myself, so I'm dipping right there at the stove. I'm going to make a mess and spill a little bit. Whoops, there it goes. Whoops, there it goes. Good recovery. And I'm being generous. I'm giving myself a nice large bowl with several ladles full of this great stew. One more. Uno mas. Okay. That's all the bowl. There's the mess I'm going to have to clean up later, but c'est la vie. Anyway, that was the his bowl. This is the hers bowl. Not quite as large. And a little bit more broth off the top for her. You should always stir everything well before you dip, because everything heavy will sink to the bottom. So give it a good stir. There's my bread. Smells great. Soft on the inside and warm. Crusty on the outside. There's my salad. There's my appetizer, saltines, cocktail sauce, and some fresh oysters. And bread for dipping. Once you dip some bread into this broth and take a bite, you will be in heaven. This is just a wonderful meal. It's great on a cold night with a movie. There's really nothing better. So that's my recipe. I hope you enjoyed it, and bon appetit.